Welcome to the Lazy CEO Podcast, where Jim Schleckser, author of Great CEOs Are Lazy and founder of the CEO Project, features compelling experts and topics for CEOs of mid to large-size companies. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome, everybody, to another Lazy CEO podcast. My name is Jim Schleckser. I am your host, and I'm the founder of the CEO Project. Today, we're going to talk with one of my partners. And probably the number one area where we see concern when we're talking to CEOs is sales. Like, nobody ever has enough sales. Nobody ever has enough revenue. There's always opportunity for upside. Even if they think they have enough, they want to have more. And yet, it's not that easy to solve that problem. Well, it turns out that Bill Bell, who's one of my partners at the CEO Project, is a bit of an expert on the area of sales and sales process and measurement and so forth. And we're going to spend some time today talking about where you might be missing a couple of tricks in your sales process and methodology, and how you might get after those things. So welcome, Bill. We're glad to have you.
Thanks, Jim. Glad to be here.
So let's start with, what makes you think you know so much about sales?
That's a good question. Well, I've been in sales for about 35 years. My first job, I was strictly a vice president of sales for 15, 20 years, and then moved into the CEO position. And when I moved into the CEO position, I kind of had a mandate in my mind that I was not going to give up the responsibility of sales. And the reason being is that I have a real strong belief that if you don't grow your top line, it's obviously going to be pretty difficult to grow your bottom line. So I was always focused on how can I grow the business? How can I develop the business? And so, that kind of got me really focused on sales. And since then, I've started my own consulting practice in 2019, and I pretty much focus on business development and strategic growth.
Got it.
So
awesome. Cool. And over that time frame, it's a long time to do sales. What have you seen change in how people approach sales?
When I first started in sales, most companies took their rainmaker and made them the sales manager. And my experience is that even though the rainmaker has a lot of skills, it's not the same skill set that's required to be a sales manager.
Right.
So I've seen a lot of companies now look at it and say, sales is more of a scientific process, or it's a engineering process, really. Right. And so really they keep their rainmaker making rain, and they hire someone that understands the strategic growth ideas of sales and business development.
Got it. We've always heard that, right? You may not want to take your best player off the field to make them the coach, basically, right? They're very, very different jobs. And we've seen even athletics, people try to do that, and they're pretty mediocre coaches. They just give them the ball and get them back on the field, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is there's always ego involvement. Probably not compensation. You probably make more money being a high-level individual contributor than a sales manager, but there's ego of, well, I'm supposed to do this, right? How do you help people see their way through that? Because that's always a people challenge when we're dealing with it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with a client not too long ago where he had a rainmaker that did a fabulous job generating sales, and he moved them into the sales management role, and he failed miserably.
Sure.
And I talked him into, let's move him back to a rainmaker, but maybe we call him give him a different title, strategic account manager, or because he was really good at finding accounts, growing the business in that account, but he wasn't really good at teaching the other people how to do that. And that's right. Part of the sales management process, is creating the processes so that the sales process is consistent, but also training the people that have to use it on how to do it, so you get some consistency. So,
Interesting.
it's difficult a little bit with the ego, but if you know what you're doing, you can handle that.
So I think that comment that you made is really the delta here, which is it used to be I'd try to hire high level performers and great athlete, right? I mean, and say go sell stuff. And I don't quite know how you do it or what you do, but you seem to bring people to golf or dinner or whatever you do and sales happen. And I think it's moved to be dependent on hiring, super people, supermen and superwomen. And that's my hot talent strategy around sales. And it's moved to let me build a process, a methodology that I can hire normal human beings, normal good salespeople who are more available, and they'll actually perform at a pretty high level. So talk to us a little about that whole process. And you mentioned the word engineering, which we use that a lot. So talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Jim, if you remember, I come from the industrial automation space.
Yeah, I know.
So my company used to manufacturing industrial processes for building engines and transmissions. When I started looking at the sales process, I kind of look at it like an industrial process. So I looked at all the different pieces of the puzzle and tried to figure out, like you do, figure out where the kink in the hose is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I kind of narrowed it down to 4 main areas that I see.
Okay.
And the 4 main areas are market positioning. So we can talk about, have you done a market analysis? Do you understand who your ideal client is? Have you segmented the market and identified which markets that you want to go after? Have you looked at the competitors, and do you understand how the competitors win and how you win? Have you created a value proposition statement? Have you looked at adjacent markets? Do you have a pricing strategy? So that's all one area, which I call market positioning.
Right.
After that, the next step is, okay, we need to have a sales process that's consistent. We need to have some consistency in the sales process. That's the only way you're going to be able to do root cause analysis and figure out what's working and what's not working. So I look at things like, do you have a lead management process? Do you have a technical sales structure support if you're selling a technical product? Do you have a go-to-market strategy? Do you have a standard structured process that everyone follows in steps with stage gates so that you can see where you are and also forecast the incoming sales? And then do you have a sales pipeline management system so that you can also do forecasting? And then do you have sales enablement tools, consistent sales enablement tools, standardized presentations, standardized brochures, so that everyone's giving the same message to the customer? And then do you have an offer preparation template so that all the offers look, consistent? And then finally, I like to look at, do you have a sales playbook? Do you have detailed exactly what you need the sales department to do? So that's all wrapped up in what I call sales process. The third thing is the sales personnel. Do they have high quality interfaces? Do they have the technical qualifications to actually sell the product that you want them to sell? Do they have any external partnerships? What's their motivation level? What's their incentive plan? Are they the right people? Do you have farmers or hunters? Neither one of them is negative. If you want to grow your business fast, you probably need hunters. If you want to grow the wallet share and your actual customers, then you want to have farmers. So you need to look at that kind of stuff. And then finally, what's the culture? So I wrap that all up in what I call sales personnel. And then the final thing is performance metrics. So, can we measure what's being done? Do we have key performance indicators? Does everybody know what they are? Does everybody know what's expected of them? Have they implemented a CRM package properly? So, so if you look at it like a piece of automation, it's like station 1, station 2, station 3, station 4, and then substations under each one of those. So it's kind of like an engineering project, if you will, even though it's a sales project.
Got it.
So,
So why don't we roll back to position? I mean, we talk about this idea of having a mafia offer, right? An offer that's good enough that you'd be crazy to say no to it. We can move market share with it, whether that's price, performance, guarantee, depends on what the clients really find important. Um, is this whole methodology that you talked about designed to get you to that point? I mean, that's sort of the outcome of this positioning exercise. Or help
exactly.
me understand how do I know if I'm doing well here? That's maybe the better question.
Yeah. I mean, the first step is understanding what is the ideal customer profile.
Sure. And
right?
by the way, this is a disease salespeople have because everybody breathing looks like a client to them, right? They want the big tent, right? They can spell the company name, they're a potential client, and that's not a good model, right?
Exactly. So you really need to narrow down, the better you can narrow down the ideal customer profile, now you're really going after people that need your product.
Right.
And then you need to develop a value proposition. Why should they buy your product? And why should they buy your product instead of someone else's product?
Yep.
Right. So you really need to do that. And then you need to look at the competitors. Who in that space are you competing with? And what would their mafia offer be? And how can you compete with that? And that kind of gets you to the pricing strategy. How do you want to price your product, if you will? And then you might want to after you've grown enough in that particular ideal client profile, then you might want to look at what are the adjacent markets. Any market that maybe is close enough that your ideal client profile fits, that you can move and expand your growth.
Yep. Yeah. And I think a disease we see is people jumping to that second, third, fifth market too early, and they diffuse their offer and they confuse themselves, right? And I always tell them, if you can't win with your perfect client, like if your offer doesn't win with your perfect client, we got a problem on our hands. We need to fix that first, and then we think about the second one.
Right. Yeah. And I talk a lot about go-to-market plan or also market analysis. When you think about the ideal client profile, you need to understand what the market is that they're in.
Yep.
And how big that market is, and whether you think that market's big enough for you to actually meet your revenue goals by having a certain market share in that market. And only after that, like you said, would you start looking at adjacent markets. But if I'm I'm $100 million company and I'm selling into a market that's, $5 billion, you know what? I probably should just stay into that market and try and grow that market before I look at some adjacent market.
Interesting. And I actually think, buyers of companies, if we ever think about that, like clean shots, market dominance in one segment is okay. We worry about concentration, but if you can control a market or have a big position, I mean, you're kind of the big dog. It really does give you leverage in a market space. Let's move over to process. So, and when you're talking about that, I was thinking about different sale types, right? There our transactional, fairly short cycle sales processes. Contact to close might be, whatever, 30, 60, 90, 180 days. And then you've got your large, sophisticated, like a SAP level piece of software or a gigantic automation project going back to your old, it could take 18, 24 months to close that deal. So can we apply process to both of those? And how do we know we have good process?
Yeah, you can absolutely have to apply a process to it. There might be more process steps. So You're right. The industry I was in, my sales cycle was between 18 and 24 months.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So I had probably a 10-stage sales process, and I didn't get to the stage 8 until we were pretty much ready to close the order. And I knew how much time each stage gate would take, right? And so then that helped me with my pipeline management, because I could look at it and say, okay, Mr. Salesman, you're in stage 6. And I still know that stage 6 takes 60 days to go from stage 6 to stage 7. Mm-hmm. You're now on 72 days.
Yeah.
What's the problem? What's the roadblock? Let's try and figure that out. So it's kind of root cause analysis. engineering again.
Yeah.
So each stage gate, yeah, if it's a quick sales process, a 3-month sales process, each stage gate might only take 4 days, 5 days,
Right.
right? But that helps you also forecast your incoming revenue, because you know how many are in stage gate 9, which are typically a 80-90% sales probability, versus stage 2, which has a 10% sales probability.
Got it. One of the things that we talk a lot about, and back to the perfect client, but there's also the perfect project within the perfect client. And particularly, we ran into this in government contracting, where a major pursuit could cost $1 million between all the talent and the spec writing and da-da. And the question is, how do I make sure I'm not chasing a rabbit I'll never catch? So
Yeah.
that must exist somewhere early in the process, right? Of like, we should decide if we're in or we're out early in the process. Help us talk about that a little bit, Bill.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. One of the biggest expenses in any sales department is chasing rabbits. Getting the whole way down. If you get the whole way down to stage gate 8 and you lose it on price, you probably should have known that they were a price-driven company way in the front. So really, in stage gate 1 or 2, I would say stage gate 1 is a marketing qualified lead. Stage 2 is a sales qualified lead. And that sales qualified lead, you really need to spend a lot of time figuring out whether this is going to be the ideal client profile or not.
Right.
What I see a lot of times happening, though, is a lot of companies, they put junior salespeople in the front of so what they do is they use junior salespeople to qualify a sales lead and then hand it off to a more professional salesperson to take it through the whole line. Well, really, the most important part is qualifying whether this is a customer that's really going to buy from you or not. And you really need to have highly qualified professional do that, not a sales lead generation type person.
Yeah. Well, and even we've seen it where they're wrongly incented. Their incentive is to drive leads to the salespeople, and quality isn't part of the conversation, as opposed to, we're going to measure you on the close ratio of the leads you give us. It might be a better metric, actually.
Right. And that again, then that drives back to, as part of the sales personnel, do they have the right incentive package that's driving the results that you're looking to get? Not just driving behavior, but actually driving the correct behaviors.
Interesting. There's a guy named Tom Searcy who's a sales trainer, and I kind of borrowed from Tom this idea of perfect customers and call it 5 to 10 questions. He calls them 2-card questions. So it's a poker analogy, but you and I could sit down for anybody and say, what are the 5 or 10 things that must be true for this to be a perfect client? Like we got to have the right sponsor. They've got to have budget. They can't be a price buyer. They have to have this problem and know that it's painful, or whatever the 10 things are. And we go, if they've got 9 of the 10, we ought to close those at a really high rate, right? If they got 3 of them, we toss them back into the ocean, let somebody else chase them because they're not for us, right?
Right, exactly. And if you're trying to grow the wallet share in an account, you might want to I help put together account strategies so that you're making sure that you're talking to the right person. A lot of times, salespeople are talking to the wrong person the whole way through the sales process until the very end. And it's like, why didn't you think about this a long time ago?
Do you have a particular sales model you like? I mean, I was always a fan of Miller Hyman for complex sales for just that reason. They talk about economic sponsor and technical sponsor and blockers. And we used to play this game of let's line them all up, red, green, yellow, red, green, yellow. Okay, who do we need to work on? Which one, is there a particular model you prefer, or are you blended?
I've used all different models, and it kind of depends on the industry that you're in. It depends on the sales cycle. It depends on whether you want to grow business or grow market share in an account.
Yep.
There's spin selling. Miller Hyman, I think, is probably one of the better ones. But I try not to, when I meet with my clients, I try not to sell them on any particular system. I try and sell them on more of a structured process. That's in my mind, the most important thing.
That's customized for them, really, right?
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So let's move over to people. And I just want to start with the recruiting of people. And I think, understanding your positioning and understanding your process, whether it's wallet share or acquisition, probably helps and informs who am I hiring. But my experience has been the one thing that salespeople can sell better than anything else in the world is themselves. So they are really hard to interview and figure out which ones are good or bad. So help us with that problem, because I see it all the time.
Yeah, and you're correct. They're very good at selling themselves. And normally, if you're a good sales manager, you can probably, separate the wheat from the chaff. But there are the industry has gotten very sophisticated in the recruiting industry. There's a variety of different personalities of testing that can be done that can really kind of figure out who's giving you a line and who really knows what they're talking about.
Give us an example, Bill, of one that you've had some luck with on the personality side, because I don't know that they're the end of the day, but I guess they inform you at some level. What do you like?
Well, I don't really have any. Sorry to say, I don't have any really specific ones that I like. I'd have to go and look through my files and tell you which ones. But if you talk to a good sales recruiter,
yep,
they all have standardized testing that they can do to really narrow it down. So, I guess my recommendation would be, if you're going to go hire a salesperson, don't try and just do it by yourself through these online recruiting companies. You really need to hire a professional recruiter that specializes in the sales field. So it'll save you lots of money.
So even though we're going to pay 25 or 30% of first year income, it's still a good deal?
Yeah, in my opinion, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Think about the turnover cost. You bring in a guy and he spends 8 months, and you realize after 8 months or 10 months that he's not the right guy. Now you have to do it again. You've lost 10 months worth of time.
And you've exposed that individual to clients. Now you got to roll that back. I hear you. I'll tell you just two quick, sales analysis tools. One company I was at, we used DISC. So drive.
Yeah, this was what I was going to say. Yeah.
And they said, high drive, high influence. Those are your salespeople. And, but yet we had a turnover problem in our sales force. I go, have we ever correlated high drive, high influence to success in our sales team? And they go, well, no. Like, well, why are you using the tool then? And then we had another one, I won't name it, but very sophisticated tool, well-known. We said, great, let's use it. They said, here's your profile for great salespeople. Turnover didn't change, sales didn't change. So I'm a little jaded, which is why I was asking the question. So
yeah, the best one I've used probably is from Korn Ferry.
Yeah.
But DISC, again, it depends on probably the market that you're in and the type of salesperson that you're looking for.
Is there any view on the interview process that we should use, or how do we know we've got a good one in front of us? I know you said a good sales manager would know. Maybe you could roll me back one then and say, how do I know I have a good sales manager who can figure this stuff out then?
Yeah. When I was interviewing salespeople or sales managers, I would ask, tell me what your process is. Tell me how you structure it. Tell me what it looks like. Give me if I gave you 90 days to restructure this sales department or the whole sales process, how would you do that? And a good sales manager can walk you through all the things that I just mentioned pretty quickly and tell you how he would go about it. If he's a salesperson, he's going to say, well, I'll just go hire a lot of guys like me and, we'll go after it. Yeah. That doesn't work.
Nice. The get her done strategy, right? You talked a little bit about sales enablement in this category. In other words, tools to support the talent effectively. And I've always struggled because, next to eating their Brussels sprouts, salespeople like CRMs almost as little. Like, they're just hard to get them to participate in the CRM process and enter the data that you'd like to see. And help us with how have you bridged that gap? Because that's always been a struggle. Like, how should I think about CRMs, if that's the right answer? And how do I get participation to occur without just having to mercilessly beat people about the head and shoulders? Which is not a
Yeah, and
strategy.
I mean, if I had the answer to that, I'd be a millionaire. I
Yeah.
mean, first thing is you need to narrow it down to what is it you're trying to accomplish with the CRM package. Do you want to use that as a maintenance package for marketing, or do you want to use it as an account management process? And then you need to, once you decide that, there's a variety of different, different
Yeah.
CRM packages. I personally have one that I like, but it doesn't mean that it has to be for everybody else. But you need to make, at one point in time when I first was starting my CRM package, I could not get my salespeople to enter stuff in. Sometimes you have to use brute force. And what I started doing with my sales team was, if you get a sale and it hasn't been entered in the CRM system, and you haven't been updating it along the sales process steps, you don't get any commission on it.
Wow. So did they like the day before the close enter all the data and see if they could try to get paid for it?
No, because you can see when they've been updating data. So at each stage gate, they had to update the data, and then to the close process. That happened to one or two salespeople where they didn't get commission on fairly large orders, and they said, okay, either I'm going to have to do that or I'm going to have to go to another company.
Right.
And in both their particular cases, they started updating the data.
I bet they did.
I do recommend that if you really have a problem with getting your CRM package implemented, to do something pretty drastic. It normally will drive results.
Well, occasionally we have that problem at the CEO project, so we may have to implement this idea.
But you notice mine's always updated because I know the importance of it.
There you go. You're not the one I'm worried about. And then performance, was the last P of your 4P model. And some people go, well, performance is orders, right? It's revenue. Like, what else should I be worried about? So how should we be thinking about instrumenting the process that you're describing, which is really where I think performance how should we think about that? What would be a couple of metrics that you'd say, man, you really need to be thinking about these 3 or 4, or does it vary too much for that answer?
Yeah, I mean, sales is the end result.
Sure.
The more important thing is everything that happens before that. So what's your close rate? What's your quality of moving from one stage gate to another? Are you meeting it within the days that we assume is the case? Is your forecast reliable? So if you tell me you're in stage gate 8, which tells me it's an 80% sale, and then you try and go to stage gate 9 and you lose the sale on price, then you want to start looking at, how reliable is the forecasting, and how reliable is he moving from each stage gate to each one. And also what's most important is that it's clear and it's transparent to everybody. So it's not just some KPIs that I'm looking at and not really showing them. I like to have a scoreboard that everyone is seeing who's doing what, because that generates competition and it generates visibility. So everyone knows how we're doing,
And that's, sort of rule number 1 of quality, right? If what you measure gets improved. So just creating visibility, you get the first slice of improvement before even any root cause or anything more sophisticated than that.
Right.
And I always liked, close ratio, deal velocity, because, time kills deals. Just to that point, let's say, because salespeople like to keep things in the funnel, and I've seen, these massive funnels with a low, close rate. So they like to keep them in. So they, it looks like they're very busy and it looks like they got opportunities, but the reality is if you dig in, they don't. How aggressive are you about tossing low qualified or slow move deals out of the funnel?
Well, what I'm a big proponent of is a weekly review with each salesperson of their funnel.
Yep.
And the ones that I see are sitting at a certain stage gate and they've been there for weeks or months, I'm going to start asking, okay, what's the problem here? Is this really a project or is it not? And normally I can tell whether the person is BSing me or not.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that kind of comes back to, if you're a good sales manager, not a salesperson, you understand when a sales guy's kind of BSing you on a certain item. But then I'll just say, hey, listen, let's get the client on the phone or the customer on the phone and understand what the issue is. And if the sales guy says, oh, no, you don't want to do that, it's probably a project he's just leaving in there to keep his funnel looking large.
Which they do, right? I mean, they do. When they're a little light on the funnel, they leave stinky stuff in there so they don't get a lot of questions about why is your funnel so small, right?
Right.
Interesting. Well, this all seems complicated. Particularly if, like, as a leader, we're not like you were, you came up the sales and marketing ladder. So when you got to the top slot, you're like, all right, that part I got, I know how to do that stuff. And maybe other things that were challenging for you, but that one, not so much. But a lot of people come up a technical ladder or an operational ladder. Or how should they approach this problem? Because I've run into a lot of CEOs that go, look, I know I've got a sales problem and I don't know how to fix it. Is that time to call in a consultant? I mean, or what's the move? If I know I have a problem and I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is trying to understand what is the problem.
Yep.
And then the second step is how to fix it. The sales assessment tool that I put together helps you identify what is the problem. Okay. Is the problem market positioning? Is the project or problem sales process? Is it people or is it performance? And I've in this performance assessment tool, I've got questions.
Yep.
Roughly 10 questions for each section. And I ask the CEO to read through them and tell me, force rank, what's the most important problem that you see in that category. And then they provide that information to me, and I look at the top 4 or 5 problems in each category. And then I will do a kind of a research project with him to look at those categories and figure out whether it's really a problem or it's not. And if it is a problem, okay, now we can put together a process to fix it, right?
So that's the
So it's just like looking at a machine, how's come the machine, or why does the machine only produce 10 parts when it's supposed to be producing 12 parts? Okay, there's probably 10 different variables that could be. Let's try and figure out what the main variable is, what the kink in the hose is, and fix that.
Interesting. So that's the diagnostic journey, to use a Duran phrase, of the self-assessment and analysis. Are we able to translate, like, if we fix this kink in the hose or this part of the process, it could be worth this amount of dollars to you? Can I tie the effort to a potential economic impact on my business as well?
I don't know. You can do a direct impact. However, I would say that the clients that I've worked with using this process, I normally can show them at least a 20 to 25% increase in revenue in 1 year. Wow. And if you keep cycling it over and over, like do root cause analysis every year and try and fix it better and better, it's not 20% improvement per year, but still you're going to get 10% the next year, 5% the next. So no.
So I got a question. You make me think, why don't I just hire an ops manager and put him or her in charge of sales? This feels like a great, like, manufacturing operations leader. Just here's a new process for you to go optimize and run. Why wouldn't that work? I mean, it feels like it the way you're talking, Bill.
Let's say it's the exact same thought process.
Right.
But I think you have to have some background in sales. You can't, because I understand this sales process optimization, that doesn't mean you can move me to my engineering department and do all the lean engineering on an automation system. Yeah. I'd understand how to do the process, but I don't really understand the actual details, if you will.
So they need some functional expertise as well as this sort of operational thinking. Got it. Okay. All right. You made me think here, maybe there's an easy solve. So this is great. And then the therapeutic would be, now that we figured out the 2 or 3 things that are critical, let's go improve process or improve your recruiting or improve your offer, wherever it sits in this grid that you have. Got it. So what if somebody wanted to engage you, Bill, for example? How would they get a hold of you? Would they come through the CEO project? What's the best way to get more Bill
Come
in their
through the
life?
CEO project. Request to have me do a sales assessment tool.
And what do you
an
charge? What
assessment.
kind of money should we be expecting for a sales assessment tool if we think we got
Sales assessment as a membership of the CEO project is free.
Oh,
I'll do
wow.
that for free.
There you go. Okay, cool.
Once we've done the assessment and I identify where the pain areas are, or where the kinks in the hose are, then I would sit down with them and say, okay, here's how I would solve this problem. This is how long it's going to take. This is how much it's going to cost. And then go from there.
Awesome. Cool. Well, there you have it. Probably the number one problem that we have in most of our growth companies is more sales. Bill's giving you a little bit of thinking about, people, process, performance, and positioning or offer, and how you can improve your methodology and hopefully jump it up. And when you think you really have a problem, it may be a time to bring in a consultant to intervene and help you sort of step function improve it, rather than roll in your own, unless you happen to have that expertise, right? Which many of us don't. So, Bill, this was great. Any final thoughts for us? How many days until golf starts? Bill lives in Michigan, so this could be like 6 months at this point. Who knows?
Yeah, but I have a home in South Carolina, so I could be golfing now, but my wife forces me to work now.
Well, thank you for coming here instead of teeing off early. So, Well, thanks for joining us, everybody, on another Lazy CEO podcast. We will see you next time. Cheers.
Great. Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by the CEO Project. At the CEO Project, we work with CEOs to help them grow their business. And our members represent billions of dollars of revenue and profit. And frankly, amongst all of us, we've probably made every mistake in the book, including some you haven't made yet. So if you want to learn from the experience of a bunch of really seasoned CEOs, we're a great place to hang out. In this podcast, what you're going to hear are some of those ideas, concepts, and things that are just going to help you on your journey. If you want to find out more, reach out to us at theceoproject.com, or you can contact me personally at jim@theceoproject.com. Happy listening.
Thanks for listening to the Lazy CEO podcast. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes, and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.